but doing well. I mean, I consider myself very fortunate personally. You know, even during the lockdown, we were able to get out and walk around the neighborhood and do things. And you know, we have the capability to work at home. It's a little bit inconvenient sometimes, but there are a lot of people who have been really hard hit by all of this, and so we're trying to do what we can, lunches for the homeless every week, and some things like that. So it's been, I think, a year that we all have to learn from.
Is that what you've been up to? Actually, I don't really know if you are in lockdown or not, but is that what you've been up to all these months?
Yes, we're really not in lockdown now, but I have to say that I'm somewhat cautious. I'm not really interested in going out to restaurants and being in crowds at this point. So still staying relatively close, but you know, we do have we still have one adult child here with us. Her job offer was her start date was postponed, but our adult son has gone back to San Francisco, so things are starting to get back to a little bit more normal.
Uh, I've been asked to ask you this, but you know, many people in lockdown have started to, you know, watch all these sort of things or do all these sort of things that they never got to do. Is there anything that you've done that or you've seen that you might want to recommend to other risk managers?
I'm not sure if I recommend it or not, but one of the things that is very new for me is the whole thought and action of presenting virtually at conferences. I'm very used to being on a stage and engaging with the audience and walking around and talking with my hands and everything, and having kind of that interactive question and answer and commenting. So this is very different as I move into kind of the virtual world, which I think we're all finding, and figuring out just on day-to-day meetings, how do we run them more efficiently? And I think we have to look at this as sort of a glass half full too. I mean, it's taught us different ways of how to operate. I think there are efficiencies that we found and some things that we'll want to hang on to when we get back to, hopefully what will be a more like we are accustomed to in terms of interaction and doing some of our work in person, and what that hybrid way of operating is going to be for us going forward. I mean, I think we've learned a lot from this experience.
Speaking of learnings, do you have anything that in particular that you want to highlight? You know, what's the biggest thing that you've learned this year?
There's actually been a lot. And I think, as with any crisis, we have to look at it as what are the opportunities that come out of it. And one of the big opportunities that I see coming out of, and I think we have to look at it, I'll take a step back, we have to look at it as more than just COVID and the pandemic. In my view, we have 3 and potentially 4 crises that risk managers and boards are having to deal with. One is obviously the pandemic, but also the economic dislocations that have occurred as a result of that, and what will be the ongoing impact on their businesses and on their consumers. And also the social movements, and what does that mean for risk managers, and the importance of ESG and managing that risk, and being able to accurately quantify it to the best possible, continue to evolve those metrics. And then I would say the fourth that is becoming, I think, an even greater consideration, and maybe not to the same level of crisis, but we have some natural disasters happening, at least here in the U.S. We've got wildfires occurring out west. We've had hurricanes come through in the south, and again, really impacting the lives of people, their livelihoods, their ability to make payments on loans, all kinds of things. So I think as we're looking at what to learn from all of this, it's one, how do you get through the crises? 2, how do you better plan for these kinds of events going forward, and have an organization that is both agile and resilient? And then what do you do to capitalize on opportunities that are coming out of it? Are there some new business products or distribution channels or platforms that you should be considering as part of your business model? And what about talent? Do you need different talent than you thought that you might have? And with what's going on in the industry, in the financial services, but also in other industries, are there opportunities to upgrade your talent because people may have been out of a job for whatever reason? And are you capitalizing on those opportunities? So I think what we really have learned, or should be learning, is that yes, there are definite downsides to everything that we're living with right now, but there are also opportunities, and we have to be looking for those.
If you don't mind, I just want to ask a follow-up question, if that's all right. So back in March feels like a very long time ago. But we've heard these phrases like grey rhino and black swan in relation to COVID-19. And I mean, the idea of a black swan event is that you can't prepare for it because it's just a blip, essentially. How do you see us preparing in the future for something similar, or especially for a black swan event?
I think it's hard to identify exactly what those events might be, but boards and risk committees and management do need to take a stab at it. And yes, we haven't had a pandemic for 100 years, but we have had them before. It's not like something came out of space and has never occurred. So thinking about history and what we can learn from it and how we should think about it in terms of our future, I think is a lesson that we all too often forget. We get very caught up in the here and now. But I think this has brought back that kind of thinking as being required. The other part of it, I would say, is that it's sort of like if you're going to go in and have an operation and it's maybe you don't want to, but it's elective, you try to be in as good physical condition as you possibly can be when you're going into that. And I think we have to do similar things with organizations. We have to have, if you're a bank, you have to be well capitalized. You have to have good, strong liquidity. You have to have talented people, as I referred to before. You have to have agility in your organization. You have to have resilience and the ability to react quickly to negative or and frankly even positive situations that come up and might not have been anticipated or expected. And I think probably the most important is to simply have that view of what are the risks that we're not considering? What is the unknown that we haven't thought about? And what might some of those things be? But even if we can't really think that we're ever going to list them all, how do we try to have an organization that is fit for being able to address them, whatever they might be?
And last question. How do you see the future of risk management following from this? So we talked about agility here. We talked about, all these different things that risk management as an industry or as a sector needs to look into. Anything to add to that?
I think the job of a risk manager and the job of a board director, particularly if you're on the risk committee, has always been a really hard job. And I don't see that changing for the better. I think it's going to continue to be a very hard and challenging job and therefore an interesting job. And that has to be, the risk manager has to be something that the entire organization is thinking about and thinking about in the terms of how do we make our business better. So on the side of every risk, there's an opportunity and that has to be thought about. But that there will be continued pressure to show how decisions are being made, how they're being documented, what data was used in making those decisions. We saw after the global financial crisis that a good deal of new regulation came into play, but also much more intrusive supervision. And I think we need to expect that coming out of this as well, that government has played a part in trying to keep the economy afloat. The banks have been part of that distribution of funding. It'll be really important to manage that risk of being able to show how those decisions were made and to document them and to use data and have adequate systems going forward. In terms of, like we talked about before, how do you address black swan events? You need to be looking at your scenario planning and your stress testing in a much more rigorous fashion than I think has been before. It shouldn't just be a compliance exercise because the regulators are telling you have to do it. It should really be a tool for managing the business and to thinking more broadly about what the risks are that the entity faces and what might be some of the mitigants and again, what might be some of the opportunities coming out of them.
Martha, thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you at the event very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Have a good day.